is said that some people are born with a silver spoon in their mouth. Well, I think our next guest was born with blue blood. And I don't mean blue as in rich, I mean blue as in blue state. Welcome our next guest, Christine Pelosi. Welcome.
Thank you.
You know, you have come of age in perhaps one of the most democratic political families in the country. What was it like around your kitchen table when you were growing up?
Well, David, we actually didn't talk a lot of politics around the kitchen table in our house. The five of us grew up in San Francisco, and my mom, Nancy Pelosi, and my dad, Paul, who had met at Georgetown and then moved to his hometown of San Francisco when we were very small. Mostly we're talking about school and homework and sports and that sort of thing. A little bit of civics, but not a lot of politics, actually, which is probably the secret to a happy family.
When did you find that you had a calling to work on behalf of the party and on behalf of people who needed your help?
Probably when I was 5 years old, when I was a little kid, little girl. I remember walking precincts with my mom. My first memory actually was when I was 2 years old, and we were in a stroller, three of us bundled up in a stroller for two, and we were campaigning with my mom. And I remember her having this scarf with the H's all over it for Hubert Humphrey, so that had to be 1968. And later, when I wrote my book, Campaign Bootcamp, and I was going back to my first early memories, and I said, Mom, now that I think about it, how did you get into all those apartment buildings in New York City that said no soliciting? And she said, I was a woman with a baby in a stroller. Who was going to stop me?
Well, and I mean, her dad, mayor of Baltimore, I mean, long-time Democratic family. I mean, we heard about that. I grew up in Richmond, Virginia, the next big city south, if you skip Washington, her current home. I mean, the democratic process and the Democratic Party run deep in your family. And now you are chair of the California Democratic Women's Caucus, correct?
That's correct.
What is the basis of that work that you do?
Well, we are very excited this month, of course, because it's March, Women's History Month, and our members have been very, very active in the community, up and down the state, and really across the country in promoting equality for women. We had a very, very exciting series of events that a lot of our caucus members were doing in the local elections down in Southern California, as well as Fiona Ma from here in San Francisco, our Board of Equalization newly elected member, and I did a very fun Ready for Hillary event over in Berkeley last week. So we've been doing local, federal, and state activism. Our only sadness really is that we can't celebrate Women's History Month with the first African-American woman United States Attorney General because the Republicans refuse to confirm Loretta Lynch. But we're confident that she'll get the job this spring, and our hope is that we'll be able to celebrate that milestone next year.
Someone asked me before the show, they said, does Christine have as much energy as her mother? And I said, well, having worked with her only briefly, I would say yes. Do you ever not stop your campaigning and your work on behalf of these causes? It seems like you're always out there doing something, doing an amazing event. You're talking about where you were last night. Does it ever stop? Do you ever get tired from it?
Well, I never get tired of politics, ever, but I'm married to a filmmaker, Peter Kaufman, so we talk about movies a lot, and our kids obviously take up a ton of our energy and time, and then I love bringing my little daughter Bella, who's just turned 6, out on the road with me. She's been to 30 states with me and 3 foreign countries doing my campaign boot camps. And so it's been fun to take her with me and to have her see what she calls the work of the Women Caucus, and how she understands that that's for her generation so that she can have the same opportunities as her brother.
Do you think we're going to see the glass ceiling shattered in your life?
Well, my mom already shattered the marble ceiling in the House of Representatives, and you could argue that it's harder to get 218 people to vote for you than it is to get 20 million because of just the way that insider politics works. Any woman who's, or man for that matter, who's had to be elected to an internal board or have an internal caucus position knows how difficult that can be. But I believe that we will see a woman president in my lifetime. In fact,
I'm pretty sure we know who you think it's going to be. I got a feeling.
Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
And I think the exciting thing that I found actually being out on the campaign trail now with Ready for Hillary, because of course it's not an official campaign yet, but I travel the country as a member of the Democratic National Committee and as an author of Campaign Bootcamp, doing my leadership boot camps, and I see the hunger all around the country. And even the boot camps I've done from Berkeley to Wyoming to Washington, D.C., just to name 3 in the past month, there's a real hunger where people are saying, it's our turn. young women especially are saying it's my turn to see someone who looks like me in the White House.
How do you teach a political novice to get out there and knock on a door with your baby in your arm, or to sometimes speak to someone that you can just see it in their eyes? They don't like me. They're going to vote against me. They think I'm crazy. How do you pull it up? I mean, is it because, as I said, it's in your family roots? Is it because of just chutzpah? Is it Catholic upbringing? What is it?
Well, part of wanting to represent people is feeling that you're going to represent people whether they vote for you or not. And one of the things that we talk about in the nature of public service, when we ask people, the very first question is, what is your call to service? What is it that inspires you to be involved in politics? Is it equality? Is it justice? Is it jobs? Is it civil rights? Is it the environment? Whatever your call to service is, that which you have felt since you were a small child, that manifest as you were growing up, perhaps professionally, perhaps in school, in internships that you did or papers you wrote, choosing your major in college, even if you thought it wasn't going to get you a job, but because you wanted to follow your passion, and you could at least till you turned 22. And then had to get a real job. What is it that is your call to service? What is your passion? And when people think about that and they speak from that, they are true, they are authentic. And my hope as a progressive is always that other people will progress and will evolve.
Right.
I know we'll talk about marriage equality later and the term evolve, but if you really fundamentally believe that people will evolve their thinking over time, then having a conversation with someone who completely disagrees with you isn't as daunting a task, because you think we could find a point of common ground and eventually we could end up agreeing.
Right.
And I want to create the space in this conversation, even though we disagree today, for us to be able to reach out to each other at a later time.
Right. I remember when I was growing up in Richmond, Virginia, my whole family was what they call yellow dog Democrats, which the term means I'd vote for a yellow dog before I vote for a Republican. But then all my cousins were Republicans. But we would have family picnics and we would talk and we might disagree. I find it difficult now sometimes to talk with people who used to be my friends. It seems like the partisan divide has gotten so hard and the edges have become so firm. How do you get through to that person, maybe whose vote you need or maybe whose friendship you treasure, that is on a different side of the political aisle, to express your opinion in a respectful way? How do you do it?
Well, first of all, as I said around my kitchen table, we don't really talk about politics. We talk about issues, we talk about values, but we don't necessarily talk about politics. Right now, if you look at the proliferation of media, you know what you're going to get when you turn on the television show. People watching the show have a pretty good idea that they're going to get a progressive vision of equality that advances the LGBTQ agenda and that advances progressive politics in particular. They know what they're going to get when they turn on Fox News, which is probably not the same thing they're getting from the David Perry show.
Right.
So we have a lot of confirmation bias that happens in the media. And as long as you're talking about something you read in the news and you're talking about the politics of a situation, I think people do go to their corners very quickly. But if you talk to them about their opinion of something, like what do you think? Not what do you think of what Romney said, or what do you think about what Barack Obama said, but what do you think about the issue? How do you think that veterans who serve the country should be treated if they're gay? Should they get kicked out for being gay? Should they get Social Security benefits now that we know that they're gay? Should they be able to get married and bring their spouse to live on the base? What do you think of that? And I think if you just ask people the basic fundamental questions about values, the values and the logistics around life, they will have a lot to say, and it's a good conversation. It's when you start talking about the politics of the politics that even I get bored, and I love politics.
Right, and you shut down, and the conversation stops. Do you think that's one of the reasons that I think more than any of us, myself as a gay man and our straight allies, have seen the issue of marriage equality progress much faster than anyone expected, because people started talking about people's lives and people they knew? It wasn't just the politics of quote-unquote gay marriage?
Absolutely. I can remember going to commitment ceremonies when I was in high school. So growing up in San Francisco and having a very pro-equality background and exposure and marching in the Pride Parade since the early 80s, it was always kind of a shock to me to go to school at Georgetown University in the late 80s and see some of the really, really negative attitudes
Right.
that were out there, just heartbreaking what people had grown up with and had to face in other parts of the country. I think that I can remember talking to our mutual friend Leslie Katz on the phone right before the election, right before the Proposition 8 election. I was massively pregnant with Bella. I was marching through the streets of New York City trying to find an open deli at like midnight. I just had to keep eating and saying, why are they not doing commercials about gay marriage that have gay people in them? And it was like, what is the problem? Why are we so afraid to tell our stories? And of course we lost Proposition 8. How in that it won, our issue lost.
Yeah.
But after that, people were insistent that we had to tell our stories, that if we were going to lose, we had to go down fighting for something. We had to go down standing up for ourselves. That maybe we lost because we didn't tell people what was at stake for us as human beings.
Because we were afraid to be who we were, and so it was like a double closet.
Right, and people know when you're not comfortable with yourself. People know when you're in a closet. They may want you to stay in that closet, they may not, but they can tell that you're not comfortable stepping out forward. And so shortly after that, in 2009, there was a new generation of young activists in particular. I remember going to Out West Bootcamp, where we brought 200 copies of my book, Campaign Bootcamp, and we trained people in marriage equality, including some people who got married after that. They would send me these notes, we're getting married. And it was really exciting because they said, we are going to tell our stories and tell people who they are. So flash forward to last weekend when Bella turned 6, and on the same day as her birthday, we went to the same-sex wedding of her best friend from preschool, whose dad's got married. So I think her generation will
it'll be quote unquote the new normal.
Right, love is love. They will see two people who love each other get married.
Talk to me a little bit about the book, Campaign Bootcamp. What has been the response to it, and when did you decide, I need to put this in book form? Kind of my philosophy, what I do.
Well, 10 years ago, we started doing our campaign boot camps all around the country with AFSCME, with the Public Service Union, who represents 1.6 million workers, who they were the only folks who believed that we could win the House in 2006 and that Nancy Pelosi could become the first woman speaker of the House of Representatives. It was, as we call it, a faith-based initiative back then. But we started doing boot camps because we said the party committees in Washington will figure out who to fire, who among the Republicans needs to go, who's the most vulnerable, all that. Let's go out into the community and train people that the American people would like to hire. And in reference to your earlier question, people who are not necessarily from politics, because the
faces.
Well, the seats that we had to win didn't have a bench, right? If you're trying to run in San Francisco, you have any number of people who can step up and run as a Democrat. However, if you're trying to win in what we call red California, right, or other places where we don't have a Democratic mayor, we don't have a Democratic state senator, we don't have the Democratic person who sat in the chairs and is ready to go and has seasoned public service. But maybe they're a veteran, so their public service has been to our military. Maybe they're a business person, but they've done work volunteering in the community as well as creating jobs in the community and have a good philanthropic approach that we think will translate into government service. Maybe they worked, as I did, in the Clinton administration, so they know about how Washington works. They've just never been elected to something before, and now it's time for them to step forward. So we were doing these boot camps, and I became a blogger. And so I blogged, and then after we won, I thought, I should really put this in a book. I'll just translate my blog to a book.
But it's not that easy.
It's not. It's really hard, because when you blog and you tweet, which I do at SF Pelosi, quite regularly, you're popping off about anything that
comes
you
to
want,
mind.
or you're sending out a blog on Huffington Post, as I do. So when I was putting my book together and my second book, I basically went to the posts that had gotten the most comments, the most feedback, the most invitations to come speak about my articles, and I thought, well, those are durable lessons.
There's a book there, yeah.
There's a book.
In our last few moments, just two more questions. One, what do you think is going to come down with the Supreme Court decision as far as marriage equality? And the last question is, are you ever going to run for office?
Well, second question first. When my 6-year-old decides I can run for office, I can run for office.
Okay.
So we'll have to ask Bella Kaufman. And I think the Supreme Court is going to rule on behalf of marriage equality. I don't believe that Justice Kennedy and the others would have spoken so forcefully for the children particularly
which was their whole point.
Which was the whole point of the Prop 8 folks. But I don't think that they would have had a forced divorce on the 18,000 couples who got married in California in the time between when the state Supreme Court said that they could and when Prop 8 was passed. So I don't. If they didn't force divorce those couples, in part because they did not want to orphan those children, I don't think that they're gonna bring more children into the world of forced divorce. I think they're going to advance equality.
Yeah, as my grandmother used to say, from your mouth to God's ears. So we'll all keep our fingers crossed. Thank you, Christine Pelosi. Always a pleasure to speak to someone about local politics, which all politics are.
Yes.
Our next guest, Eric Jansen, celebrating 10 years on the longest-running LGBT radio show in California, Out in the Bay. We'll be right back.